You probably woke up this morning with a mind that felt like a crowded room. Before your feet even hit the floor, you were already halfway through 3 different versions of your life. In one version, you are a master of craft, sitting in a quiet studio, finally mastering that one skill you've been flirting with for months. In another, you are leading a team, solving complex problems, and navigating the fast-paced energy of a high-level career. By the time you've finished your first cup of coffee, the weight of these possibilities has already started to press down on your chest. It isn't that you don't have a plan, it's that you have 10 of them, and each one feels like a piece of who you are. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from being capable of many things. It is a silent, heavy anxiety that most people around you don't really understand. They see your intelligence and your curiosity as gifts, and in many ways they are. But to you, they often feel like a curse of fragmentation. You feel like a radio that is picking up 5 different stations at once, and because the music is all so beautiful, you can't bring yourself to turn the dial and settle on just one. You worry that by choosing a single path, you are effectively murdering all the other versions of yourself that could have been. You feel frozen, not because you are lazy, and certainly not because you lack discipline, but because the cost of choosing feels like a permanent loss of soul. I want you to take a deep breath and realize something very important. You are not broken. You are not flaky. And you are not a jack of all trades, master of none, in the way that old cynical saying implies. What you are experiencing is simply internal overload. Your brain is a high-performance engine that is trying to pull a dozen different trailers at the same time. It's natural that you feel stalled. It's natural that you feel a sense of secret shame when you look at your friends who decided they wanted to be accountants or teachers at age 22 and never looked back. You wonder why it can't be that simple for you. You wonder why your curiosity is so restless. But what if your inability to settle isn't a flaw in your character, but an indicator of a different kind of destiny? If you could only be one thing, which version of you would you have to leave behind? And are you actually willing to say goodbye to them forever? We live in a world that was built for the specialist. For decades, the blueprint for a successful life has been a straight line, a single, sturdy ladder leaning against a very specific wall. You were told to pick a major, get an entry-level job, and spend the next 40 years climbing that same set of rungs. This model works beautifully for the industrial age, where we needed people to be cogs in a predictable machine. The advice you've been given your whole life, to focus, to pick a lane, to specialize or die, comes from a time when the world moved much slower than it does now. When you are forced into one of these narrow boxes, it creates an immense amount of emotional friction. It feels like being asked to wear a uniform that is 2 sizes too small. You can zip it up and you can perform the role, but you can never truly breathe. Society treats your wandering interests as a bug in the system, a distraction that needs to be disciplined out of you. They tell you that if you don't commit to one thing, you'll never be valuable. But this advice fails to account for the way your mind actually works. For you, narrowing your focus doesn't feel like getting sharper. It feels like becoming a shadow of yourself. The metaphor of the road is often used in career advice. You're told to stay on the path. But for someone like you, the road is a prison. You see the meadows on either side, the mountains in the distance, and the hidden trails that everyone else is ignoring. The pressure to stay on the pavement creates a deep sense of resentment toward your own work. We need to stop thinking that focus is a process of subtraction. You have been told that to focus means to cut away everything else until only one tiny point remains. But what if focus could be additive? What if your career didn't have to be a single ladder, but a landscape that you own? What if the very thing people call distraction is actually your greatest competitive advantage in a world that is changing faster than the specialists can keep up with? To find your way out of this fog, it helps to stop thinking about job titles and start thinking about shapes. For a long time, the gold standard was the I-shaped person. The vertical line of the I represents deep, singular expertise. These are the people who know everything about one specific thing, but very little about anything else. While the world will always need them, the I-shaped path is a dangerous gamble for someone with a mind like yours. It leads to burnout and a feeling of being trapped in a silo. On the other end of the spectrum is what we might call the dash-shaped path. This is the horizontal line, someone who knows a little bit about everything, but never goes deep enough to create real value. This is where the scattered feeling lives. It's the person who starts 20 hobbies but never finishes a single project. But there is a third way, and it is the future of work for people with restless minds. The M-shaped career. Imagine the letter M. It has multiple peaks of depth, and those peaks are connected. An M-shaped person doesn't just dabble. Instead, they choose a few distinct areas, let's say 3 or 4 over the course of a decade, and they dive deep enough into each to become truly competent. They don't try to be the world's leading expert in all of them, but they reach a level of mastery where they can actually produce results. The magic of the M shape isn't just in the depth of the peaks, it's in the bridges between them. When you have deep knowledge in graphic design and a deep understanding of psychology, you aren't just a designer who likes psychology. You are someone who can create visual experiences that change human behavior. That intersection is where your unique value lives. You don't have to be the best in the world at one thing to be irreplaceable. You just have to be in the top 10% of 2 or 3 things that rarely go together. Perfection in one area is a lonely, crowded race, but a combination of 3 different strengths is a category where you are the only runner. Think of your various interests not as separate rooms, but as different lenses through which you view the world. When a specialist looks at a problem, they see it through a single lens. A carpenter sees a world of nails. An economist sees a world of incentives. But you have a bag full of lenses. When you face a challenge, you can swap them out. You can look at a business problem through the lens of music theory, or a social conflict through the lens of biology. This ability to connect patterns across fields is a rare form of intelligence called integrative thinking. In the modern world, most of the easy problems have already been solved by the specialists. The problems that remain, the big, messy, complicated ones, require people who can build bridges. You are a natural translator. You can speak the language of the creative and the language of the analytical. You can see how a lesson learned in gardening applies to project management. These insights aren't distractions, they are innovation in its purest form. Innovation is rarely about inventing something entirely new from scratch. It is almost always about taking an idea from one field and moving it into another where people haven't seen it yet. I want you to look back at all the failed paths you've taken, the degrees you didn't use, the hobbies you dropped after 6 months, the jobs you left because you were bored. None of that was a waste of time. You were collecting data. You were building a library of metaphors and techniques that you will use for the rest of your life. Even if you never return to that specific craft, the way it taught you to think remains part of your mental architecture. You are not a quitter. You are an explorer who has finished mapping one territory and is ready to move to the next. Your curiosity is not a leak in your tank. It is the fuel that allows you to see connections that others are blind to. The reason you feel anxious isn't because you have many interests. It's because you're trying to pursue them all simultaneously. When you try to move in 10 directions at once, you end up vibrating in place. The secret to a successful M-shaped life is not simultaneous everything, but serial mastery. You have to give yourself permission to live in seasons. Instead of asking, "What should I do with my life?" ask yourself, "What is my focus for the next 18 months?" 18 months is long enough to achieve something meaningful, but short enough that it doesn't feel like a life sentence. When you commit to a season of focus, you lower the emotional stakes. You aren't choosing one path and killing the others. You are simply putting the other paths in a waiting room while you give one of them your full attention. This creates momentum. Momentum is the only thing that cures the scattered feeling. When you actually get good at something, when you move past the beginner stage and into the depth of a craft, the anxiety begins to lift because you are finally seeing the fruit of your labor. There is a big difference between an intentional transition and an impulsive quit. An impulsive quit happens when things get hard, and you use your other interests as an escape hatch to avoid the discomfort of growth. An intentional transition happens when you have reached a peak of competence, you've gathered the lessons you needed, and you consciously decide to move your energy to the next peak of your M. When you view your career as a series of chapters rather than a single book, you can commit fully to the current page without the fear that you're missing out on the rest of the story. You are safe to choose imperfectly, because in a long life, no choice is truly final. We need to talk about the boring stuff, the day job, the routine, the steady paycheck. For someone with a mind like yours, there is often a lot of guilt associated with having a stable, perhaps even uninspiring job. You feel like you're selling out, or like you're wasting your potential by not spending every waking second on your passions. But I want to suggest a different perspective. Stability is not a prison. It is a platform. When your basic needs are met and your environment is predictable, your brain finally has the surplus energy it needs to explore those higher-level interests. Creative energy is a finite resource. If you are constantly worried about rent or struggling to build a career from scratch in a field you're not yet certain about, you will have no mental space left for the very curiosity that defines you. A stable job provides cognitive support. It handles the logistics of survival, so your mind can be free to wander in the evenings and on the weekends. There is no shame in having a bread-and-butter profession that pays for the tools and the time you need to build your multiple peaks of mastery. You also don't need to monetize every single thing you love. We live in a culture that tells us if we have a talent, we must turn it into a side hustle or a business. But for the multi-interested person, this is often the fastest way to kill the joy of the interest itself. When you turn a passion into a job, it gains deadlines, expectations, and pressure. Sometimes, the most strategic thing you can do is keep your most precious interests unproductive. Let them be the places where you play, where you are allowed to be bad at things, and where you don't have to answer to anyone. This protects your energy and ensures that your career supports your life rather than consuming it. Because your mind is a generator of ideas, it is a very poor storage unit for them. If you rely on your memory to hold all your interests, you will always feel overwhelmed. You need an external system, a second brain, or a simple garden of notes, where you can park your ideas for later. When you have a brilliant insight about a subject you aren't currently focusing on, don't try to pursue it immediately. Write it down. File it away. Give it a home outside of your head. This allows your mind to let go of the holding pattern and return to the task at hand. Over the years, you will find that these archived interests start to talk to each other. You'll look back at a note you took 3 years ago about architecture and realize it's the missing piece for the marketing project you're working on today. This is how the M shape truly forms, not by force, but by the slow accumulation of connections. You are building a library of yourself. Success for you is not reaching the top of a single mountain and staying there until you retire. Success is the ability to navigate a whole range of mountains, knowing that each one you climb makes you better at the next. As we end this conversation, I want you to give yourself permission to evolve. You are allowed to outgrow the things you once loved. You are allowed to be a different person 10 years from now than you are today. Your value is not found in your consistency, but in your depth and your ability to weave different worlds together. You are not scattered. You are multifaceted. You are not lost. You are an explorer. Trust that everything you are learning is part of a larger pattern that will only make sense in the rearview mirror. For now, just focus on the current peak. The rest of the landscape will be waiting for you when you're ready.